Welcome, everybody, to the RFP Success Show. I am your host, Lisa Rehurick, the #1 sought-after authority on RFP success. And each week, we bring you information, strategies, or resources to help you win more business through RFPs, and hopefully have a little bit of fun doing it. So let's get this week's episode started. And today's guest is Drea Douglas. She's Director of Talent Management Consulting at the Brooks Group. Welcome, Drea. I'm so excited you're here.
Thanks for having me, Lisa. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. So one of the reasons that I wanted to have Drea on is that, and I'm going to have her introduce herself a little bit more here and tell you what she does, but actually, you know what, Drea, I'm going to have you do that first. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us what you do and what your background is.
Absolutely. Well, I am the Director of Talent Management Consulting at the Brooks Group. And what that means, well, the Brooks Group overall is a sales training and sales leadership training company. So we go in and help corporate sales teams establish a clear sales process so everybody's speaking the same sales language, using the same process that their managers can coach them to, and everybody's on the same page, playing off the same sheet of music, as well as leveling up their selling skills. My role here at the Brooks Group as the Director of Talent Management Consulting is in the assessments arena. So we use assessments in the sales training to personalize that training experience for each of the reps that go through it. But our clients also use that tool for hiring and selection. So hiring the best candidate from their candidate pool, as well as using that assessment to onboard, train, develop, career path, etc., once they've been hired. And I manage a team of consultants that consult with our clients on that tool. I manage the operations, et cetera, et cetera.
I love it. I love it. And, you know, so I got introduced to Drea a couple of years ago, and it's been phenomenal to learn about what these assessment tools can do in addition to the Brooks Group's sales process and their impact selling training, which is what she mentioned earlier as well. And the reason that I wanted her to have her on the show is because from an RFP perspective, these assessments and thinking through the way the assessments can help you encompass a whole lot with RFPs. It encompasses sales, which an RFP is a sales tool, absolutely. It encompasses hiring, which Drea was just talking about, and it also encompasses team development. So, you know, when you're working on an RFP, obviously you've got this team of dynamic people, not always people that report to you. They're all over the place, and really learning to understand the different behavioral styles and things like that, I think, can be very helpful. So we're going to have a really amazing discussion today about the assessment tools and how they can work. So let's start off with this question here, which is, why is it important for us to understand or know about behavioral styles, which is one of the assessments that you all do?
Well, behavior is powerful to understand because it tells us, it unlocks a person's communication preferences. Our behavior style drives our communication preferences. And I like to talk about the two fundamental communication truths. So one is that people think if you're not like me, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
And the second is people take communication styles personally. So think about yourself, for example. If people speak to you in a way that you don't appreciate, for example, somebody takes a very demanding approach and you don't like being dictated to or feel like someone's demanding of you. And to you, you think, why? Either a lot of people think, for example, why don't they like me? Or why are they such a jerk?
Yeah.
So they take it personally, but that's just that person's preferences for communication. And if you're picking up on those vibes from that person, you don't take it personally, but you see it objectively as, okay, this person's preference for communication is for me to be very direct. Bottom line, they don't want me to beat around the bush. They don't want me to ask them questions about their personal life or their weekend, which a lot of people do in selling. They think, oh, I need to go in there and warm them up. But some people don't appreciate being approached like that. So just like that, you don't appreciate being approached in a demanding way, they don't appreciate being approached in a friendly, casual, informal way. They think of that as, why are they wasting my time?
Yeah, and you know, that's important because we do always, it seems that we approach things in our own way. Like that's human nature, right? To just go out in our style. right?
Absolutely. And what we teach people here at the Brooks Group through the sales training is to approach in neutral. So if
Oh,
you are using an assessment, for example, and you know what your style is, either dialing it down or dialing it up to meet people in neutral in that first face-to-face contact or online contact. So if you know you are a very gregarious, outgoing, bubbly type of person, most people respond well to that, but not everybody.
not
Some people
everybody.
really dislike that. In fact, they're like, I don't know you. Why are you treating me like I've been your friend my whole life, right? Or they think you're unprofessional, quite frankly. So if you know that about yourself, dialing it down, being more poised as
Yeah,
opposed to bubbly.
I love it. Yeah, so I'm a really high I, and we're going to talk about the styles here in a second, but I am that gregarious, outgoing person, and you're absolutely right. Like, I would say the one thing that you said that resonates with me the most is people don't take you as seriously, or people don't think you're as professional, and that can be a big barrier to success. So that's great.
Absolutely.
So can you introduce our listeners to the 4 behavioral styles?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're familiar with DISC is a popular behavior assessment, and each letter stands for a different approach. So D stands for dominance, describes a person's approach to problems. The I stands for influencing and describes a person's approach to people, especially new people. The S stands for steadiness and describes their approach to pace. And the C stands for compliance and describes their approach to procedures. And depending on where you score on a scale from 0 to 100 in each of those letters, it tells us your approach and your preferences and tendencies.
Very nice. And so I would guess that each one of these, as you were stating a little while ago, each one of these has different conflicts. Maybe the I and the S get along, or the D and the C get along, but the I and the C don't. Where do the conflicts occur the most within
That's a great
those?
question. So the S's, actually, folks with high S scores tend to get along the easiest with all the other styles. So there's
Mm,
the least amount of conflict with S's and everybody else. And that's because they're very accommodating and very patient. The D's have the most conflict with the other styles. So even other D's, most of the time, so high I's get along with high I's famously, just like me and you, Lisa.
yes.
High S's get along with high S's, C's get along with C's because they inherently understand how the other person prefers to communicate and what they're going
Okay.
to be sensitive to, what they're going to like and what they're not going to like. But high D's, they are the very assertive, direct types, and they don't like other people having an advantage over them.
Mm,
So they can tend to, if they have another high D in the room, they're trying to establish dominance
got it.
on a pretty ongoing basis. So as the service provider, it's really important to be aware of that and to allow the client a little bit of that dominance if they are also a D.
Yeah, so it's interesting because, of course, I'm very deeply embedded in this as well, and I do a lot of work with the DISC profile, and I always love talking to Drea because inevitably I learn something new. Even though I've been doing this for a couple of years now, she still teaches me something new. So she's breaking it down so simply here, and you don't have to. I mean, it's great if you can do the assessments. The beautiful thing is to do an assessment on yourself, and then you can figure out, you can learn more about yourself and then figure out how to apply it. But let's say somebody has not taken the assessment, they haven't had that opportunity. How can they apply this information, or can they, without really having intimate knowledge of the assessment?
Well, with DISC especially, you can find DISC online. Not ours. Ours is not free, obviously, but there
Right.
are versions of it that you can get feedback about yourself and take a version of it to get a rough understanding of your style. It's a very popular behavior assessment. I highly recommend doing that, and then becoming aware of not only your own style, but doing research and finding out a little bit more. Like I said, it's kind of like MBTI, right? It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. There's a ton of information about it out there on the internet. So if you can learn kind of the nuances between high Ds, high Is, high S's, and high Cs, you're going to put yourself at a real advantage.
So how does this come into play in a selling environment?
Well, to the extent that you're dealing with people, right?
Right.
So in your first you have what they say, like 19 seconds to make a first impression.
I think it's lower these days.
Is it?
Yeah.
I believe it. So,
Right.
so approaching in neutral is crucial. And then adapting your style, we call this interactive flexibility. So it's the ability to identify the behavior style and therefore the communication preferences of the person across from you, and then adapt your style to meet them where they are so that you're communicating with them in a way that they're going to be receptive to. And we've all been sold to in ways we don't like,
Yep.
and so really understanding that, taking yourself outside of your own preferences instead of enforcing your personality on somebody else. You want to make sure you're adapting yours. And really, I think the best way to do that for folks who haven't taken the assessment is to find information about it online. I mean, do
Yeah.
some research and you can find it out there. It's easy to find.
And I would guess really powerful, because to me, this is kind of a ninja trick in selling, because I don't think there's a lot of people out there paying that much attention. It does take some time and effort to adjust our style. Right. So how, this is maybe kind of a loaded question, but how long do you think it takes somebody to adjust their style? Because it's not just like I'm going to go read something online and learn about it, and then tomorrow I'm going to apply it and everything's going to be hunky dory.
For
Right.
sure.
So it's going to
Well,
take some time.
it's uncomfortable too. So that's a great point that you're making. And what I recommend for people is that they practice. So role playing can be invaluable. Find somebody who's willing to work with you, a friend or a significant other, and work on adapting your style. I know for me personally, it was very uncomfortable. I'm a low D naturally and a higher S. And working with high Ds as a low D and a higher S, it feels like working in a pressure cooker. It's very uncomfortable. And communicating with them in the way they like to be communicated to a high S feels rude. You're being very direct, you're getting straight to the point. You're not engaging on a personal level. It's very formal. They prefer a more formal approach as opposed to informal. And so just embrace the discomfort. Understand that, this isn't going to come naturally right away, but the more you can practice. And another thing I recommend for people is to pick a role model. So if you realize that, so think really long and hard about, who are the hardest people for me to sell to? What are the characteristics and traits they have in common? All right, I'm going to find somebody that I am close to, who demonstrates those qualities, and I'm going to try to do those things, to mimic them, literally mimicking them. And really, even as adults, we can have role models, and that's a really powerful way to start to adapt or adopt new characteristics, and just be open to the fact that it's okay for it to feel like it's not very genuine at first. It's not going to. It comes completely unnaturally to you. But over time, you can get good at it, and become more of that chameleon.
And it's worth it, right? Because your clients are going to resonate so much more with you versus just coming at them like everybody else does. And that, you said earlier about we've all been sold in an icky way. You probably said that more eloquently than I just did. But I would say probably most of us have been sold to way more in negative ways than we've got way more negative experiences with selling than we have positive experiences.
Absolutely. A good selling experience is one where you don't realize you're being sold to.
Yes.
You
and
really
you want it. So you want it so bad. Yeah.
You just feel like it's a natural part of the process. You're learning what you need to learn. You're asking your questions. You're finding out how much it costs. It's not confrontational or uncomfortable at all. But the one thing that you mentioned there, I wanted to comment on is the power of building trust and rapport from the outset of the engagement is crucial. And that's where behavior style and communication preferences come in. If you can master, and DISC makes it easy, right? That's 4 basic personality styles. I mean, there's more to a person than just their behavior. But if you're going to focus on one thing that's simple and easy to implement, that's definitely a good one to focus on. And it's going to really help you establish and build trust and rapport from the outset of an engagement. And people buy from people they trust. A lot of people place an emphasis on being liked, that's unnecessary, honestly. Being liked is a perk, but a lot of people place an emphasis on the relationship and building the relationship with that person. But people buy from people they trust. So it's more important to be trusted than to be liked.
Great point. I love that. So, most of the listeners are listening because this is the RFP Success Show and we respond to RFPs. And RFPs are very obviously there's a whole relationship building component outside of the RFP. But when we get to the RFP, we are selling via a written document.
Mm-hmm.
So, right, that makes it a little bit more difficult. How do you apply behavioral styles into your writing? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So from the outset, even before you start writing, I would say you want to ask as many questions as you can about the RFP, committee, right? So
Yep.
who is my audience? You want to find out about who, and even going as far as to ask, what should the RFP include? How should it be structured? They may have a very specific format that they require, so they can compare their RFPs, apples to apples very easily,
Yep.
or the proposals, sorry. And so what should it look like? How should it be laid out? So you want to find out from the customer what their preference is. And that will make it really simple. But then, depending on who you've been talking to, so let's say you're talking to somebody who's very clearly a high D, they get to the point, just tell me what I need to know. Don't waste my time.
Yep.
You want to deliver in bullet points and
Nice.
only the most relevant information to help them make a decision. They're decision focused. Okay.
Yep.
And results focused. Focus on what's going to get them the result they're looking for. High I's, you might, if it's a proposal, you really want to, you probably still don't want to be too flowery or informal or casual. You would want to keep your side conversations more so that way, but they don't mind, the occasional emoji. I don't recommend that in your proposal, but in your email communication back and forth, that's okay. Or, more exclamation points, showing more emotion is okay with High I's. They like to connect on a personal level. Those are the ones that it's okay to engage in being liked or likable with them. They will respond positively to that.
Okay.
All right. So the S's, they don't like unexpected changes and they don't like to be rushed. So they're the ones that take longer and they just, they want to feel safe and accommodated. And they're going to be accommodating of you. They're the ones that are very patient and they want to be able to evaluate and they don't want to take a lot of risk. So making sure to minimize that. The C's want every detail. They don't want any stone left unturned. They fear making mistakes. And a lot of people think people make decisions based on price, but most customers don't want to make a mistake, actually. Yeah. So less about price, more about minimizing risk. So especially for the high C buyer, you want to make sure you include as much detail and information as possible.
I love that, because I agree with you that most of the time it really isn't about price. It can be about value. It can be about minimizing risk, things like that. I like that you put that in there, the minimizing risk. What if the evaluation committee has all 4 of those personalities on it? It's a committee, you got one of each. How do you approach that?
Well, I know for myself, I recently created a piece of marketing collateral, and it was a one sheet, and it had 2 sides. On the front side, it was very clearly for the VP of sales, for example. Okay. It had a lot of pie charts, graphics that illustrate the point, bullet points, and then on the back, that was for the HR leader. So that's where all the nitty-gritty EEO compliance information, scientifically validated, here's the process, here's what it looks like, information is. So it appealed to both. I don't know if that's possible with your proposals, but that's an approach I've taken in the past for communicating information concisely to a wide audience.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things that I recommend in my book, and I recommend to my clients all the time, is to kind of tier their answers. So the first part of the answer being a little bit more short and succinct, almost like a little mini executive summary, because you're going to have, some of those behavioral types that are going to say, I'm just going to skim. I'm going to read the highlights, but then, go into greater detail for the people that need the detail, or even attach additional detail if they really want that. But, it does take some work, right, to blend all of that together. But hey, we're trying to get some revenue. We're trying to make a sale. So it's worth that
Absolutely.
work,
That
right?
makes perfect sense. And, starting out strong with an executive summary will work for a lot of people too. If you can start strong with a statement that really clearly meets the stated objectives of the client,
Yep.
that's going to put you at an advantage, and also make it worth any communication style's while to keep reading.
Yeah. And to kind of draw them in and be appealing to all of them, but thinking about
Yeah.
all of them.
Yeah, and you always want to use their language. So however they say things, whatever words they use, whatever phrases they use, you want to try to include that. It's the same thing with, for example, applying for jobs, right? With applicant tracking systems, you want to go in from the job description, you want to take those words and phrases straight out of there and put it in your resume now, because those applicant tracking systems are looking for that very specific words, and we do that as humans too. So as much as you can, use the words and phrases specifically that you've picked up on. You want to use their terminology.
That's a really great point. A really great point. Love that. So we're talking about selling, but this assessment, all of your assessments, which I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about all of them here in a minute, but from a hiring perspective, how does this information help companies that are hiring team members? Because we all know we've all made the mistake of making a bad hire. It's sometimes kind of hard to hire the right people because people are on their best behavior in the interviews. How does this information help you in the hiring process?
Well, exactly that. So you want to make sure you understand who the person really is, not just who they are in the interview process. Now, it is important that they show up to game day. That's one of the variables in the hiring decision. They need to impress you in the interview, but you want to understand if that's who they really are long term. So that's what the assessment does. It's three sciences measuring three different aspects of a person. So behaviors is first. We've talked at length about that. And I like to
Yep.
talk about behavior as like the cover of a person's book. So, that's what people see about you, and they make judgments about you based on how you come across.
Right.
But there's more to us than just what's on the surface. And we can't know that unless we measure it. So the second science is motivation. This is most important. We consider it most important for long-term success and superior performance in a role, because if your job rewards what motivates you, you feel engaged. You really enjoy doing what you have to do every day. It's not what you have to do anymore, it's what you get to do. So if you want to make sure you're hiring people who are going to be engaged in the work, and you're not going to have to hit them with the cattle prod every 5 minutes, like, why aren't you out there? Why aren't you out there? You want to make sure that what motivates them aligns well with what the job rewards before you hire them, because those things are fixed about people. They don't change. You cannot manufacture motivation. I'm sure there are lots of people out there who have tried. It doesn't work.
Motivation is my favorite because I think it's so powerful. It's so powerful for us to think about, just even from our own personal perspective, like what does drive and motivate me? And we might think it's one thing, but really for those of you out there that haven't taken that assessment, if you take it, you'll discover things that might be like, oh yeah, that's kind of obvious. But if you had to articulate it before taking that assessment, you might not have been able to. So super powerful, those motivators.
Yeah, really good for self-awareness.
Yes. All right. And then the third science.
So the third science is what we call personal skills. And it goes the deepest. It measures a person's mental clarity and focus, which is associated with their ability to make good decisions day to day. So I like to think of it as the polish of a person. Are they at a higher likelihood of making good decisions day to day? Are they able to connect the dots and figure things out on their own? If you've ever worked with people who, for example, didn't seem to be able to learn from their mistakes, or couldn't figure things out without someone holding their hand, or they came across a little awkward, quite frankly, they struggled with interpersonal skills, they may lack mental clarity and focus in an area that leads to poorer decision making.
Interesting. So you pull all of those three together for not just hiring, but for all of that comes into play in hiring and in team development and in selling skills, right? Kind of across the board. would you
Right. I
say?
mean, it's people, right? So we're just
Yeah,
measuring people in ways that really help us understand them more fully. But it is complex, but people are complex, and
yeah,
in any arena where people are involved, it can help inform or make people better in that area, including relationships, personal relationships.
true.
Um, Getting along better with your spouse, understanding how they prefer to communicate, not taking it personally when they communicate with you in a way that you don't really like.
For those of us that are single, we should have all of our potential significant others take the assessment before we commit to anything.
Highly recommended, highly recommended. My husband took it after we were married, but it's helped our marriage tremendously. I'm just understanding these things and not holding those things against that person, but embracing them and seeing them as valuable and meaningful and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I love something that you said at the beginning of the call that, it helps us to learn how to not take things so personally, that it's not about us. Somebody's not out to get us. Somebody's not out to annoy the heck out of us. It's not that they're just trying to make our lives miserable. They
Right.
just approach things, if we're talking behavioral styles, they approach things from a very different perspective. And that awareness in and of itself, I think, is really powerful, which sounds like what you're talking about with the relationships. It's not like you're changing the person. You're kind of changing your perspective and your awareness about it, right?
Oh my gosh. And you kids, you can't change people and you
Right.
shouldn't try to. It's not your job. You can only control yourself and really try as hard as you can to love people as they are or
Yep.
accept them as they are at a minimum. And this works on teams too. So when it comes to teams, we'll do workshops, especially for dysfunctional teams
Hmm.
where we plot everybody on a wheel and it shows all the people and where they plot based on their disc scores, and they can see, okay, we've got a cluster of high D's over here and they've got one outlier person over here who's a high C. And it really helps people become much more aware of the dynamics on the team, and also the value that each of those members bring to the organization. It's really about focusing on the value that person brings, not the fact that they're different from you and they do things differently. Thank goodness there are people out there who do things differently,
Right.
right? And who have
Yeah.
different instincts and preferences and tendencies. Someone else is going to be much more comfortable and excited to analyze data. And I don't want to have anything to do with that. I would rather go out and talk to people and consult, and they don't want to do that. So thank goodness we both are on the team, and we each have our own individual strengths and can kind of support each other in our weaknesses.
Yeah, and when we're talking about RFP teams too, this is really important because generally on an RFP team, the person that's in charge of kind of moving the bus forward, making sure everything gets done, is not hierarchically the top dog, right? And so they're having to manage people that are higher than them in the hierarchy, people that are maybe leaders in the organization, and they've got to be a little bit more assertive and direct with them, but that might be really wildly uncomfortable. But I find that if you know this information, you've got this, and especially if you bring somebody in like the Brooks Group to help you with that kind of a development conversation, it's really powerful, so that everybody on the team understands that, hey, everybody's trying to get a job done, and we're all different cogs in that wheel, but just understanding our behavioral style better, I think, is brilliant. And that's exactly what you're saying here.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the whole value of a exercise like that with a team, especially, or coworkers, um, is really understanding your particular strengths and what's going to make you feel uncomfortable, what's in your comfort zone and what's outside of your comfort zone, and just having that awareness and developing the things if you need to, by taking action and putting in place a structure to help you overcome the things that you're uncomfortable with.
Yeah, and it is interesting because I do get that question a lot from some of my teams is, how do I manage up? How do we teach our people to manage up, or even manage laterally when they don't have any control over that person,
Yeah.
really? So,
And don't get distracted by personality differences. That's
yeah.
the whole thing. People get so distracted and derailed by personality differences that they can't stay on what we call on purpose. So
Yeah.
focused on what we're trying to accomplish together. So that's absolutely key.
Yeah, and two things that you said earlier in the call that I love. The one is the approaching and neutral. If you can kind of wrap your brain around that, I think that's huge. And then embracing the discomfort. Like we all have to be outside of our comfort zones on occasion and just embrace that.
Yeah.
So, do you have a specific story that you can share that showcases the power of how applying these types of assessments either really helped close a sale or really helped hire the right person or something in one of those realms?
Sure. Well, I can think we're talking about teams right now, and that's one that's really comes to mind.
Okay.
We had a client approach us because the VP of sales and marketing, he's actually a co-owner of the company as well. And he had two leaders in the organization, senior leaders, who had to work closely together, who just were butting heads. You know, one was a high I, one was a high C. And those are naturally opposed styles. The I is very expressive and a little bit more emotional, more casual and informal, while the C is very precise, analytical, leave out the feelings, let's focus on facts. And so they needed to get along and lead without personality differences getting in the way.
Okay.
So we did a side-by-side comparison report where it has their two assessments side by side, and I walked them through basically a communication exercise. And by the time they finished, I followed up 6 months later with the VP of Sales and Marketing, and he said, well, among other things, our revenue has increased as a result of this communication exercise for these two leaders.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
The power is incredible that, basic personality differences, humans, just because of personality differences can get in the way of revenue.
Yeah.
But if you can remove those barriers and help them better understand each other and communicate more effectively, then you're going to increase the likelihood that you're going to get your revenue will go up.
And we don't always connect those dots. Actually, we think, well, communication's over here. There's interpersonal issues going on, but we're over here doing what we need to do to make the sale. Everything's fine. Those are two separate issues. I think a lot of times organizations don't connect those dots. So I think that's a really powerful story to say, hey, they actually saw the revenue increase based on a relatively simple exercise. I mean, this wasn't like a 10-month program that they had to go through. This was like one exercise through these assessments.
Yeah, they each took the assessment, which is 45-minute time commitment, 30-minute time commitment, and then we did the exercise, which was an hour, where we walked through their results and helped them. And it's very engaging too. They have to share with each other what their priorities are and help them understand in the context, like, why is this important to you and why is this important to you? And you just get two adults in a room sharing, and all of a sudden, I won't say they're best friends, but they're getting results.
Right. Yeah, and that's okay though. And you kind of said that earlier in a different way, but it's not about us necessarily being the best of friends or liking each other. Really, it's about the respect and the awareness of the value that we bring along with the differences.
So true.
Very cool. Well, this has been great information. So if somebody likes what they hear and they want to get in touch with you, I actually have kind of a two-part question. One, what types of things should they call you about? Anything that we've talked about today, does the Brooks Group do, or do you specialize just in one particular area?
Our expertise lies in sales training and sales leadership training,
Okay.
As well as hiring and selection with the assessments.
Okay.
So if you're curious about any of those topics, we're the people for you.
And they're fabulous. So how do they get in touch with you, Drea?
Well, they can email me at ddouglas@thebrooksgroup.com. Douglas has 2 S's.
Okay, and we'll have that in the show notes. Okay.
Excellent.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here. As always, it's a pleasure. And, I could talk about this topic for like 8 hours straight. So
right.
We will just stop here. We're both extremely passionate about it because of the power of it. So thank you for being here. I greatly appreciate it. And everybody listening, thanks for being here. You've been listening to the RFP Success Show. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please click on the subscribe links. Leave us a review. We always appreciate reviews. And we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.